Before the main part of the podcast, I would like to give a little shout out to the University of Hertfordshire, who are doing a doctoral study on something that is often overlooked in academia. They're conducting research into the experiences of parents or carers who help to look after a child or children where the family has a parent that has mental health difficulties. Now, that is a bit of a mouthful, but what they're looking for are people that are supporting a family where the parent or a parent has a mental health condition and you're supporting their child within the family. And this study is aiming to learn more about the experiences of parents and carers who look after a child or children in the family where the parent has a mental health difficulty. So, for example, this is if someone has a parent that has been living with bipolar or any other kind of mental health issue. So in this situation, what they're looking for are people such as the partner of the parent who is suffering from a mental health issue, the grandparents, older siblings, aunts and uncles, and so that's anyone that is really providing support to the child who is living with a parent that has a mental health issue. And these people will be often providing emotional support for the child. They may also help out with household chores and so forth. And these people are really important to the family and supporting the family generally. However, there's been a lack of research done on this area. So the guys at the University of Hertfordshire are looking for people who are looking after a child or children aged 4 to 17 with a parent that has a mental health difficulty. So this could be officially diagnosed or it could not be. So it doesn't really matter if it's diagnosed or not. Participants are expected or should be willing to take part in an interview with the researcher to talk about your experiences. And what will happen is that it will go into the larger study for the researchers to find out more about how your support is impacting the family and yourself. If you are willing to help out in this research, you will be asked to take part in an hour-long interview, and this interview and its location is generally flexible depending on your individual needs. And if you are nowhere near Hertfordshire, they can do the interview via Skype with you. So if there's anyone out there that's listening to this podcast and you think that you fit this criteria and you would like to find out more about how you can get involved with this research, all you need to do is send an email to r.bishop@hearts.ac.uk, or you can tweet at BeccaJBG. I will put all of this in the show notes for you so that if you are interested and would like to participate, you can easily find the information. I think that this piece of research will be invaluable to those that are looking after or helping out a family who has mental health issues ongoing. And you telling them your own personal experiences can help with them supporting other people who find themselves in the situation as well as yourself. So that was just a little bit of a shout out to this research study being conducted at the University of Hertfordshire by Becca. So good luck, Becca, in your recruitment of participants. Hello and welcome to the Mental Health Book Club podcast with your hosts Sydney Timmins and Becky Lawrence. We would like to take this opportunity to let you know that we will be covering a diverse range of mental health topics that may be distressing to some listeners. You can find a full list of the topics being covered in each episode in the show notes. Please check the show notes before listening to any of our episodes. Welcome to the next episode of the Mental Health Book Club podcast with your hosts Sydney Timmins and
Becky Lawrence. Today we're reading My Heart and Other Black Holes by Jasmine Warga.
And so I've got a Goodreads rating for this book of 4.02 stars, and she has had an incredible amount of ratings and reviews with 28,036 people rating it and a total of 4,290 reviews. And on Amazon, she has a rating of 4.6 stars from 93 ratings. So we both gave it 4 stars.
Yeah, I really liked this book. It was really quick to read and it had a really great story, I thought.
So in this book, it does touch on one particular main topic, which is suicide. So if you have any issues with suicide, please do not read this book. But here is the book description. 16-year-old physics nerd Azelle is obsessed with plotting her own death. With a mother who can barely look at her without wincing, classmates who whisper behind her back, and a father whose violent crime rocked her small town, Azelle is ready to turn her potential energy into nothingness. There's only one problem. She's not sure she has the courage to do it alone. But when she discovers a website with a section called Suicide Partners, Azelle's convinced she found her solution. A teen boy with the username Frozen Robot, aka Roman, who is haunted by a family tragedy, is looking for a partner. Even though Ezelle and Roman have nothing in common, they slowly start to fill in each other's broken lives. But as their suicide pact becomes more concrete, Ezelle begins to question whether she really wants to go through with it. Ultimately, she must choose between wanting to die or trying to convince Roman to live so they can discover the potential of their energy together, except that Roman may not be so easy to convince. So the book opens with Ezelle, who is a telemarketer part-time, and I think the description of her surroundings is fantastic. So she states that she is the only person in the entire office that wasn't around to be witness to the fall of Rome. So that's indicating that all of her colleagues are a lot older than her, because she's only 16 and it is her part-time job, and she's working for something called Tucker's Marketing Concepts. And the description of the location, which is in the basement of a dingy strip mall, just makes you kind of go, yeah, I can definitely understand where she's coming from with that one.
Yeah, and this is a part-time job around her going to school, and she is there to earn a little bit of extra money and to get a bit of experience. But she spends a lot of the time making phone calls, but in between she says she can't make it through one whole phone call without then going on the internet and having a look at different things. And this is where we get introduced to the website that she's been looking at.
And that is the website that has the page titled Suicide Partners. And she's looking at the different suicide partners. She spends quite a lot of time during this introduction contemplating what it would be like to die and to commit suicide. And that all of the people that she's reading about that are posted on this website are miles and miles away from her until she finds one that isn't so far away from her.
Yeah, she rules out a lot of people for various reasons, including the soccer mum, which you mentioned. She doesn't want anyone with kids, because it'll add the extra guilt to her, to her death, and she doesn't want someone who's going to pull out at the last minute. So she is really narrowing down who she wants, and then she finds someone who is nearby. They literally pops up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's literally someone has just posted.
That's when we learn a frozen robot.
Yes. The advert that she opens up is titled April the 7th. And when she opens it, it says, "I'll admit I used to think this was stupid. The whole point of killing myself is so I can be alone forever. So I never understood why I'd want to do it with someone else. But that's changed now. I'm nervous I'll chicken out at the last minute or something. There are other things too, but I'd rather not get into that here. I only have a few requirements. 1, I don't want to do it with anyone who has kids. That is too heavy for me. 2, you can't live more than 1 hour away from me. I know this might be hard since I live in the middle of nowhere, but for now I'm sticking to that. And 3, we have to do it on April the 7th. That date isn't negotiable. Message me for more information, Frozen Robot."
And so we find out that Frozen Robot is apparently a he. He's 17 years old, and that he is from Willis, Kentucky, which is about 15 minutes away from where she is. And a surge jolts through her, and she is like, well, hey, about time. And she feels excitement, and she's excited by the fact that she may have found her suicide partner.
Yeah, she has a lot of the same requirements. She doesn't want someone who cares. She doesn't want someone who's too far away. She wants someone that's close to her in age, and he's only a year older. So all of those things seem to be pointing her in the direction. She also thinks it's slightly fate that it just suddenly came up on when she was on there and looking for this sort of thing.
And she doesn't really care about what date she does this on, so she's like, okay, I can live with the stipulation that it has to be April the 7th.
Yeah. She's then told off for using the internet at her work.
And we hear a bit about Mr. Palmer, who is her boss. I think it's really funny. His description is that he can be fixed by having a haircut. A few cut with the scissors will sort out his entire life. But it's much more difficult for Ezelle. And we get this interaction between her and Mr. Palmer where he basically turns around and asks her not to come in the next day because of what they're going to be doing at work. So we start to get a little bit of an insight about her father and what he may have done. So I've got an interesting quote here, or from the book, that states, "The inside of my mouth fills with the sour metallic taste I've come to know as humiliation. My life can be neatly divided into 2 sections, before my father made the nightly news and after. For a moment, I allow myself to imagine that this conversation would sound like if my father weren't my father. Mr. Palmer probably wouldn't speak to me like I'm a stray mutt raiding his garbage can. I'd like to think he'd have more tact, but no one wastes their tact on me anymore. But then it hits me, the thought I tried to squeeze out of my mind. You wouldn't feel any different inside."
I thought it was really interesting that we don't properly hear about what happened with her father until she actually tells Roman later on in the book. It is something that she keeps from us, the reader, as well as him, for a very long time. She's really ashamed of what happened. She feels that it is also partly her. She takes on a lot of the guilt, I felt, of what he had done.
We start to get some kind of hint of what it could be, because she says that she sat in front of a poster of Brian and they are trying to raise money for Brian to go off to compete in the Olympics. And it has something to do with his brother.
Yeah. So there's a few little hints just to keep you anticipating what it could be. And I thought that was really well done by the author, the way they kept it hidden but kept giving you little tiny snippets to get your intrigue going throughout the book.
And so we start to kind of get this indication that something majorly has happened with her father. And that could be the reason why she has decided that she no longer wants to live anymore.
Yeah, and I found that it personally quite hard to read, that this person so young does want to do this. But then that's one of the good things, I think, with the book. It's actually having that discussion that young people do feel this way, and actually getting them to think about why, and getting them to get help as well.
And it's quite an open discussion, isn't it, really, about the thoughts that may go through someone's head before they commit suicide, about the positives and the negatives and how society views the fact that someone may have decided to commit suicide. I think at one point it is written that she feels that suicide is the coward's way out, but I would definitely disagree with that particular aspect of the book. When we see the internal monologue going on for Ezel, where she's thinking about the fact that because she thinks suicide is the coward's way out, she feels that she is giving up, she is surrendering, she is trying to run away from the black hole of her future, and she is preventing herself from growing up into the person that she's terrified of becoming. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be easy, but I do feel personally that suicide is not necessarily the coward's way out. It's what you feel is the only option for you. You've kind of exhausted everything else, and that is what you are left with.
Yeah, and I do think she doesn't know how to change what is inside her, and that's the problem. Is she feels she has this part from her father that's going to be innately inside her as it was him, and therefore she'll end up doing this horrible thing like he did.
Exactly, yeah.
And she doesn't know or doesn't feel that you'll ever get rid of that. And it's that fear of that thing inside her that she has no control over that actually is the reason that she wants to do this.
And I also think it's really interesting that she's come to the conclusion that this is what she wants to do. However, she's worried that the other part of herself, which is the part that is like, no, you want to be alive, that self-preservation part, are in conflict with each other, and that if she doesn't have a suicide partner, then she's not going to be able to go through with the suicide itself.
Yeah, she does feel that she will chicken out at the end, that she needs the peer pressure to be able to go through with it in those last moments.
And that perhaps a failed attempt would be even worse, because she may end up in a wheelchair or eating pulverised food, she says.
And she doesn't want to be a burden on her family. She really considers that actually if she did that and she was pulverised, or she was in a wheelchair or whatever, she'd be more a problem for her family. And she's trying to not be a problem for example, her mum.
I just think it's really interesting that there is this kind of way up of the two situations of this reasons why she wants to live, but then also the depression and the reasons why she doesn't. And that seriously, it is not an easy decision to be making.
No, and yet when she does make that decision to meet him, and that she does feel a sense of calmness, almost like now the decision's done, that she's going to go through with this, that things are set in stone. And even people like her colleagues that she works with, the ancient people, comment that she seems happier. And actually that seems to be because she has decided on the outcome.
She has made this decision. And I do think that it probably shows you the intricacies that goes through someone's head that is contemplating suicide, that it isn't easy, because you have all these conflicting information and all of this stuff that could stand in the way, but you still have this overwhelming desire to not be here anymore.
Yeah, and it's that deep depression, isn't it? And she calls it her black slug, which I really like, that we've talked about giving things a name, and she calls it her black slug, and she talks to her and tells it to get down, and but then she says it is always there, and it's that presence that inside her that's there.
And that's the thing that is talking to her and trying to, in some ways, convince her that this is her only option. So when Frozen Robots advert pops up, she's like, well, hey, we're in. We've got someone that could be a suitable partner. She contacts him and they make a decision to meet up together.
Yeah, to discuss, make sure they're both on the same page, that they're going to do it together. And actually, the book starts a countdown, doesn't it?
It does.
Every chapter shows you how many days are left ready for that day that they're going to do it.
So, as you said, we have this countdown, and it starts at 26 days and it works its way down to the actual day that they are going to commit suicide. So that's April the 7th. And I think what is really interesting is that despite the fact that she really hates her father for what he did, she still has these positive memories. And those are interspersed through the book. I don't know what you thought of those. I thought that was interesting.
And actually later on she does admit that she does miss him, and she feels guilt for missing him because he's done this horrible thing. But she still loves him. He's still her dad. And I think as well, because he had a mental health illness that caused him to do the thing he did, therefore she's been living with him with this mental health illness. So I think she does feel that what happened was almost inevitable because of his illness.
Yeah.
So he's almost partially not to blame for it.
But I think it takes for her to get to the end of the book before that realisation comes in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It takes her quite a lot of processing before she gets to being able to see that.
Yeah.
And I think the depression is the thing that's standing in the way of getting to that conclusion.
Yeah, I think early on she just sees that he was ill and that this happened and it's awful. And
I don't think she necessarily thinks that he's ill. I don't think she necessarily knows that until later in the book, when she decides that before they are going to go through with the suicide that she needs to see him for the last time. And that's when she goes and finds out where he is.
Really, because I think that when they were living together and he had these mood swings. And
I think she understood the mood swings and the bits and pieces, but I don't think she necessarily understood how significant that was until later, when we find out that he's been moved from prison to a mental institution.
Okay. All right. I felt that she did have some understanding because of the fact that he had the mood swings and things like that, that he obviously had some kind of illness. And that's, I think, what scares her, that this illness might be in her as well.
Potentially. Maybe I've just got the wrong end of the stick.
Well, we were both reading the same book, but you can both take things in a different way. So,
yeah, exactly. So we get to read about one of those memories that she has, and this kind of shows us where her love of physics comes from. So it's quite a strong theme through the book that she thinks about things in terms of physics, which I think is really sweet.
I do, and even Rowan picks up on it when he can tell that she's gone off into a thought on physics while they're together because of the sort of expression that she has on her face, which I find quite funny.
Sorry about the noise in the background. I foolishly gave the rabbit some cardboard and he's now decided that he's going to chew on it. So we've now taken the cardboard away from him. So hopefully he should be a little bit more quieter.
Yeah, the problems with having a house bunny, although how much I love him.
So the memory is of her taking things apart because she decides she wants to know how to fix it. So as a child, what do? Open it up, play with it, and then put it back together. Or at least try. And we see this interaction between her and her father, and he is like, well, what are you doing? And she's like, well, I'm just breaking it so I can learn how to fix it. And I think that's really sweet because you're like, oh. But he then has this gesture where he puts his hand on her shoulder and she remembers how big his hands were and that he has these long, thick fingers, and they're the type of hands that make you feel both scared and safe at the same time. And he says to her, Zelly, there are enough broken things in the world. You shouldn't go around breaking things just for the fun of it. The clock stayed dismantled for years until I eventually threw it away. So she doesn't end up being able to fix what she has broken.
I thought the interesting part of that quote is where she says about the long fingers, the type of hands that make you feel both scared and safe at the same time. It probably sums up what she feels for her father as well.
Exactly, in the memories.
Yeah, he is a safe person. He is her father. But at the same time, she is a little scared of him because of some of the mood swings that he has shown her that he has.
And we learn later on in the book that what has happened with her father is that he has unfortunately killed someone as a result of him misinterpreting a situation.
Yeah, because of the build-up of paranoia as well that he had over children stealing from his shop.
So there is this miscommunication and understanding of what has happened, and he takes a baseball bat, and unfortunately his rage is so strong he ends up killing this older brother of Brian, who is now going to the Olympics.
Yeah. So you get this impression that the father, she loves him, but at the same time she has this fear of him and what he can do.
And I can completely understand why she would be in two minds about it. This person that should be the safe person and loving and nurturing person has turned out to be someone that she didn't expect him to be.
Yeah. And I think even in their home, there's been an element of he's not stable as well, which has made her home life not as stable as it could be. partly because her parents do split up and she ends up living with dad and mum goes on to marry somebody else.
And has more children.
Yeah, but you've also got the fact that he isn't stable mentally, and so she isn't sure what dad she's going to get.
Yeah, is it going to be happy, fun-loving dad, or is it going to be paranoid dad?
Yeah, I thought the way this book was written is really good. The way that it snips in little bits about all the characters till you start to build up a picture of what's going on.
I definitely think that is really interesting in the way of character development. I did feel that as you got additional information, you got to really feel more for that character.
Yeah, and I think because it's all in her head, it felt more like a natural thought process rather than her sort of telling you the whole story, which she wouldn't naturally do. She was only thinking of the little bits because she knew the whole story. So she only was thinking about little bits because that's what her brain would do.
Exactly, and she wasn't trying to remember what had happened with her dad, just that something had happened.
The flow, I think, is really, really natural in this book, but it also gives you that anticipation that you want to know more. I read this so quickly, this book. I'm quite a quick reader anyway, but I really just didn't want to put it down. I wanted to learn. I wanted to get to the end. I wanted to see what would happen on the 7th of April.
Another thing that I really liked was the way that Azelle describes depression. I don't know if you remember that. I'll read it out to you.
Yeah.
Depression is like a heaviness that you can't ever escape. It crushes down on you, making even the smallest things like tying your shoelaces or chewing on toast seem like 20-mile hike uphill. Depression is part of you. It's in your bones and your blood. If I know anything about it, this is what I know. It's impossible to escape. I
thought that was really sad thought that she had. I would like to think that depression is actually something that you know isn't in my bones. I'd like to think it's something that, yes, I have had it and it probably is a little bit always with me, but generally I can get over bits of it and move on. I know other people that feel that it is part of them completely. So I think that does depend on where you are in the depression, but also how deep maybe you are in it.
Exactly. I think at this point we can probably safely say that she is very far and very deep into the depression.
Yeah.
And that she is finding it hard to find the positives in life.
Yeah.
And again, that is completely understandable. If you do feel that life is so bad and you've got to the point where you are contemplating suicide and are making plans to commit suicide, you probably are at your lowest point.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But I do think that the description, for me, when I was at my darkest points, sum it up extremely well.
Yeah. No, I do. And I thought that the description that you used was really good. The heaviness, it definitely, I thought was a really good word to use for depression. It does feel, some people call it the black dog that follows them around. She then calls it her black slug later on, but it's her sense, the discussion of the emotions in the book, I think are really good.
Yeah, me too. I also really liked the part where she starts to look at her English class from the perspective of her own depression, and they're talking about poetry and how eager her class is to go and jump in and dissect the poetry and what it are the hidden meanings behind what the poet has written.
Yeah, she says, you're making uncomplicated stuff complicated because you're trying to guess what they're getting at, how are they doing this, and I love that part of poetry. So for me, I was like, but it's fun. But then she's like, you know what? They were depressed.
They were sad.
That's enough. And she even thinks that the teacher, Mrs. Marks, actually sometimes gives her a look knowing she knows. She feels this. She knows what she's feeling. She knows what John Berryman, the author, meant, but she never calls upon her to talk. But this is why she said she likes physics so much, because everyone is trying to make the complicated uncomplicated rather than make the uncomplicated complicated.
Which they're doing in this English class.
Yeah, so that's why she sort of justifies her, that she really likes physics for that reason.
So a part in the book that I found particularly difficult is the fact where she has to walk past a memorial to Timothy Jackson, who happens to be the boy that her father killed. What did you think about this?
I thought it was awful that she has to walk past this memory every single day on her way to gym, and that she says that even though she tries not to look at it, she just can't help looking at it. She just can't help remembering. And it's basically a kick in the teeth to her every time. She's remembering the potential that this boy had and how it was lost. And then she feels the guilt as she walks past that actually it's partly her fault that this happened.
I think that's probably the most difficult part that I find, is that she is constantly blaming herself for the actions of her father.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's what's causing this overwhelming depression that she's facing throughout.
Well, we find out later on in the book that she wasn't there on that day because she was at her stepbrother's
birthday, wasn't it? Or sports day? Sports, I think.
Sports, so it was his first sports match or something, so they went to watch the sports match, and she wanted to be there for him and support him because she really likes him and they got on really well. And that's why she wasn't there. So I think that reason is playing throughout the book, although you don't learn about it till later, that actually there's a guilt that she should have been there to help stop this from happening. So she has taken on the guilt of her father.
Exactly, and it's totally unjustified. She shouldn't feel guilty about the situation. It's not like, I don't know, I don't think that if she was there, she would have been able to prevent it.
No, definitely.
But I think that it's interesting how we get to have some information. So this is where we start to find out a little bit about what has happened. And it says that the plaque doesn't say it, but might as well, is that my father is the reason Timothy Jackson is dead. Yep, my dad is the stellar individual who slashed the Olympic dreams of the whole town. Every year on Timothy's birthday, the news runs a special just to make sure no one forgets about him. It's been 3 years since Timothy died, and believe me, no one is close to forgetting about it. Especially now, since Brian Jackson is about to qualify for the 400-metre dash. Yes, the exact same event Brian's trying to fulfil the dream his older brother was never able to attain. The local media can't get enough of the story. My school hallways can't get enough of the story.
Yeah, and she often talks about when she's asked a question in class and things like that everyone else is chatting and discussing, and she talks about the rumours that she hears from all the other students and that. So I think she is always sort of like in the back of her mind. Anytime anyone's saying anything near her, she is got that paranoia of they're talking about this. They're talking about her dad. They're talking about her link to her dad.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think that it's really sad that later on we have this memory that she has about her mum looking at her with this combination of love and longing, like I was a mirror into her past life, a bittersweet memory, and that was prior to her dad committing the crime. And the fact that her dark almond eyes would glaze over, she'd tilt her head forward with her straight light brown hair would fall over her thin shoulders, and she'd squeeze my hands tightly like it gripped me hard enough. I'd transport her back in time. It was almost like I was her permanent bruise, not a painful bruise but a tender one made of melancholy memories. So it's kind of talking about the way that she reminds her mum of her father and a time that was better.
Yeah.
And that since then it's gone downhill and her relationship with her mother is very much strained.
Yeah. When she does talk to her mum admits that she just didn't know how to talk to her, so she didn't. She didn't know what to say, so she didn't. So she was actually looking at her with her own vulnerabilities and her own failings rather than in looking at her failings, which is what she believes is happening.
Exactly. And I think that's really nice. I don't know if nice is necessarily the right word, but it's just really heartfelt that when they do sit down and have that conversation, that she does tell her the truth and how she feels and admits her own failings as a mother, going, look, I didn't know what to say. And to be honest, what can you say as I don't know, if I was in that situation, I don't know what I would say to a child about the situation. I don't know.
Yeah, especially your child as well, because you don't know what they're thinking, you don't know how deep it's going. I felt really, really hard that the mother, there is no manual to being a mum. There's no manual to do what to say to your child when the father commits murder. There isn't that chapter for them to read and to refer to.
Although it might be useful.
It might be for this particular mother especially. So, there is no right or wrong way of doing it. And I think she feels as long as they're getting back to normal and she's getting back to normal life, and that's what she appears to be doing to everybody else, because they don't see the black slug that she's got inside her. So they believe that she getting back to normal is the best thing.
Yeah, and I also see that you can see through the book that perhaps some of Hazel's behaviour kind of indicates that she is depressed, so the withdrawal from her family. So we learn that she has a half-sister called Georgia, and that they are in the same room, and that she does basically tries to push her away.
Yeah.
And I think that is really sad for her as an individual, because she just thinks that everyone is looking at her and that is tainted by what her father did.
Yeah, she thinks nobody wants her around because she's a reminder of her father. That's what she truly believes, that her mum doesn't want her around because she reminds her of her past. She wants her new life and her new family, and that's what she wants. She wants her half sister wants her to be there, sharing her room, having to be there. It's if it's she's a thorn in everyone's side. You know, her classmates, her school, everybody just sees her as a reminder. That's what she believes.
Exactly. And she also talks about how Georgia has gone and tried to use her father's murder to her advantage and be able to propel herself up the social ladder.
Yeah.
Which, again, is quite a sad prospect.
It's so well written, though. You can actually sort of understand where she's coming from, you know, not just as a child, because she, you know, she still is a teenager, a young lady, but even as an adult, you can see how her perception of the world, which part of me wanted to all the way through the book going, no, that's not the way it is, just say something, just people want you there. But at the same time, you can see where her perception of the world is coming from.
I just wanted to be there and give her a hug.
I know. I just did.
And that's how this book made me feel, is that there was this overwhelming empathy for Ezelle during this book that you just go, wow, I just want to reach out to you, and I want to be the one that provides you with the comfort and the reassurance that you need to get you to understand that there are people out there that want you here.
Yeah. And it's that lack of wanting that made me feel really sad, that she feels so unwanted.
Exactly. And it's, I don't know, I found that the most powerful part is that the emotions that were evoked in, I wanted to protect her.
Yeah.
I wanted to be there for her.
Yeah, and I think when Raymond comes on the scene and he starts to see her in a way that she hasn't seen herself in a long time, and actually he does want her around because he wants her around for the end, but he does want her around. And then, you know, as he's doing that, she starts to feel that want and feels wanted by somebody.
And I don't know, there are points in the book where her sister is trying to reach out to her, but I think she misses it completely. So there's the point where she is asking her mother to attend a basketball game that she is being a cheerleader at and is doing stuff with, and she asks Ezelle if she wants to come too, and she automatically dismisses that she's doing it because she has to rather than because she wants her to be there.
Yeah, and again later when she joins them at the zoo and she thinks it's because she wants to flirt with the boys. Part of the book that I really liked was the ongoing music involved. It all stems from another memory that she has with her father, where he plays classical music to her and says to her that he one day forces her to sit down and he says, really listen. He urged, his dark eyes wide and focused. All the answers are in the music. Do you hear them? And, you know, really builds her love for this classical music. And so she listened and she at that point pretends that she does hear the answer and goes along with it. But throughout the book, she hums music like Mozart and things like that when she is stressed, when she's worried, whenever
emotions are high.
Yeah, sort of almost as a coping mechanism for anxiety, she hums these classical tunes. And the only answer she says she now finds in the notes is April the 7th, which made me really sad that it's the only answer she could get from the music. But I thought that ongoing theme was quite interesting. What did you think?
I did too. It runs through the book, and I don't know, it's not necessarily a common thing for most 16-year-olds to enjoy classical music. There are some exceptions, and I may be one of those exceptions. But I think it's really interesting how it is one of those reoccurring themes, and I think it shows her progression, I think, and just the fact that there are still things that she can enjoy.
Yeah, and how you can put coping mechanisms in without even realising it. So she is using it as a coping mechanism, but doesn't really know that's why. She just thinks that she likes to hum music.
No, I think it's definitely an interesting plot point, and it does help hang the story together more.
Yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was a really interesting thing to introduce from the author.
At this point, we kind of start to get to know a bit more about Roman, or Frozen Robot. She likes to call him Frozen Robot, and I can definitely understand why, because she kind of wants to keep the personality and that attachment away from him if she refers to him as his screen name.
It's also a bit more sciencey, which she likes. You know, it's the Frozen Robot, and it does give you a sense of frozen in time, you know, in that moment of the depression and all that kind of stuff, which I think she feels a little bit stuck in the moment of what her dad's done.
Yeah, exactly. And she also in some ways kind of criticises it. She goes, frozen robot? Seriously?
Yeah.
Kind of like, don't, literally.
Out of all the names to pick.
Yeah, what? Frozen robot.
Then even he doesn't like it. When she does call him that, he's like, don't call me that.
Call me Roman.
Yeah, and she's like, but it's his username. He picked it.
Exactly. And he basically tells her that he doesn't want to flake and that she has to be really serious about the suicide partnership.
Yes. He actually writes, if you're really serious about this, we should arrange a time and place to meet, but you have to be serious. I don't want to flake, Roman. That is literally the message.
And
short and sweet.
Okay. All right then. And she constantly is fighting against this fact through the book that she doesn't want to be a flake.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want to let him down.
Yeah, there's this it's kind of a little bit hypocritical, but the reason that she wants a partner is because she's scared she might flake out. Because she's worried that she won't go through with it at the end. And I hate the use of the word flake out because I don't think that's what it is if you decide not to commit suicide.
No, and definitely don't, no, flaking, no.
And whereas flaking makes it seem like such a, a negative thing to do. And actually it's she chooses life and that's a great thing. And I just think that the word flake though is such a almost the teenager part of it coming out there. This idea that you're going to flake out, and it's the peer pressure side of things.
Exactly.
I think.
And I think it's really interesting because as we start to go through the book, their relationship grows and they do start to realise, or she in particular starts to realise that perhaps suicide isn't the way out and that her depression is starting to lift somewhat. And that she then decides that she's going to fight for Roman because he doesn't seem to be identifying any of these changes, is he? So he's much more... He's determined that April the 7th is the day he's going to commit suicide. And we understand, or we start to find out why April the 7th is so important to him as we start to learn about Roman's story.
Yeah, he's more open about it than she is.
She hides it, doesn't she?
Yeah, but I think that's because really early on when they first meet, they go to this root beer place and they're meeting up, and then there's other students there that he knows, and they come over and they talk to him, and they realise that she realises that he knows the victim of her father's crime.
Yeah, he used to be friends with him.
Well, they used to train together, didn't they? And so because of that sort of element, she suddenly goes, oh my God, when he finds out, he might not even want to be my partner anymore because he's going to hate her as well as everyone else and kind of move away and then starts putting him in the category of everybody else. So she's so worried about that she really holds back on what's going on.
Whilst in comparison, we find out that the reason why Roman wants to commit suicide on April the 7th is such a sad story is the fact that his sister died on that date as a result of him neglecting his brotherly responsibilities by looking after her and babysitting her.
Yeah, so while he was babysitting his sister, he had a girl over and they decided to go into his room and do what teenagers might do. And so that his sister didn't hear, because, that God forbid that would happen, he decides to turn up the music. And so she says, I'm going to go have a bath. He goes, go on then. Now, what you do find out at this point is that she has epilepsy. She's not meant to have baths on her own in case she has a fit during that time. And unfortunately, that is what happens. She has a fit in the bath. And if she did yell out, and there is an if, we don't know, if she did yell out while that was happening, he couldn't hear because he had his music turned up, and therefore she dies in the bath. He then finds her and then realizes, and he blames himself because he should have heard, he should have been a better brother, he shouldn't have been fooling around with that girl.
However, on the other side of things, perhaps it would really be more on the parents because they left him in charge of the younger sister.
Yeah, and the mother, you find out later on that the mother does take the blame herself, and has even said to him,
it's not your fault.
Yeah, you're not to blame. It's my fault. I shouldn't have left you with her. I'm the parent. And he thought that even though she said that, he still thinks she blames him rather than actually taking responsibility onto herself.
And it made me want to cry for the family.
Yeah, it made me think, what is going to convince this boy that it was all right? Because how do you convince this boy that it's okay that this has happened and you just move, that actually he is always going to feel some guilt for that, even if you do tell him every single day, it's not your fault, it's not your fault. He was there or wasn't there, and in that moment. And so at this point, I just went, oh my God, how do you get over an event like that?
Because I don't think you can.
No. And it made me think of a friend of mine, unfortunately lost her brother to leukemia, and she describes her grief as a suitcase. It's an analogy she heard and she then told me about. And she says, some days is heavier than others. Some days, it's light and anything and it's fine. Some days you're so heavy you're just dragging it along. And she says no matter what, how many times she wakes up in the morning, that suitcase will always be there. It's always something baggage she's got to carry for the rest of her life. It just means it's just that the weight of it depends on the day.
That's a really good analogy. I really like that.
Yeah, I did. And I thought that's what made me think about this book, that he's actually going to have this baggage for the rest of his life. And at this point, he doesn't think he can take carrying that baggage.
Which just makes my heart bleed.
I know. He's so young and he has so much potential as well, because you find out he's really sporty. He had the potential to train and go on like this other boy is to the Olympics and all this kind of stuff. And then you just find out that, he's popular, he's friendly, he seems like a really nice guy.
But he's given up.
He just can't live with what he feels he's done.
Which he hasn't. And I think, I don't know, this is probably from my own childhood, but the fact that his mother has, again, it's another fantastic example of a mother expressing that she has failed and telling her child that she has failed and it's not their fault. Just like we see with Azel and her mother.
Yeah.
I think even though things have happened and mistakes have happened and as a result there's been some catastrophic things, you kind of go, wow, these are actual caring parents.
Yeah. And these are parents, there are a lot of parents out there that leave their children with teenagers. Your older teenagers look after the younger siblings. I know I looked after my cousin and I must have been 14 and I was looking after him and he was like 10. And anything could have happened, but we were entrusted with that and you were left with that responsibility. It happens all the time. So it does make you suddenly think what could go wrong and what could that child is then living with that guilt.
And that's something that I wouldn't wish on anyone.
No. It's really tough. And it was a point in the book that I actually was just like, I get where he's coming from. I don't want him to commit suicide. I don't want him to do that. I want him to find a way through. But even in those moments, I'm going, but how do you do that? How do you convince him? And that found the book really hard to read at sometimes because I almost could understand why he would want to, and I didn't like that because I wanted him to choose life.
Yeah, another person you just wanted to reach out and protect and give a giant hug to and just go, seriously, this is not your fault.
But this is the thing with the book. I think one of the best bits about these characters is these could be anybody. These characters are everyday people living in an everyday life. It's not like these characters, so you can imagine them being the children I work with at my school. I can imagine them being us when we were younger. These are the kids I can actually see this happening to. And that's why I think the book is so good, because it's so relatable. So I want all teenagers to read this book because I think it would help them to understand a lot of their feelings that they're having.
Exactly, and as we continue to go through, the relationship between Azel and Roman develops, and she starts to realise that actually he is actually worth something. He is not this person that should be blamed for the situation he is in, that he has so much potential in life. And as that starts to develop, you can see kind of the switch from her, that she decides that actually she wants to live. She doesn't want to be that flake, but she decides that her mission now is to help Roman.
Well, I think they both realise that they both have this potential. He sees it in her because when he makes that drawing, he draws her how he thinks she should be rather than the way she is. He sees the potential in her just as she's seeing the potential in him. It's just I think they react differently to seeing that. He reacts in that it's all about her. She sees it as actually, if I can see it in him, maybe I've got it as well.
Yeah. I think one of the things that concerns me, though, about this book is that teenagers out there will go, well, if I am getting to the point where I'm suicidal, perhaps I need a suicide partner, and will follow suit.
Yeah.
And I don't know. For me, it was a very private and individual thing. I didn't necessarily want anyone to know or anyone to help me. However, I don't know, maybe there would be this misperception that if you got a suicide partner, somehow you would be able to talk each other out of it and not go through with it. But then if
you get someone talking,
that is true. I think the positive of this book is that it shows that there are people out there that will have suicidal thoughts, and that maybe the best way to handle that is to talk to someone. Potentially not another person who is suicidal, but maybe someone who is able to give them support that they need.
I mean, there is a perception, and I find this in education, that teachers will see students friends with other students that have their same mental health issues, for example, self-harming, and they don't want to talk about self-harming because it then triggers people to self-harm, and actually that has been looked at, that there are studies about that. However, they also see self-harmers making friends with other self-harmers, and then they're like, oh, but they might make things worse, they might not help each other, when actually the students themselves often feel they found someone who feels the same way that they do, and actually that's comforting because you don't feel so isolated and alone in your feelings, and that can in itself be very therapeutic. So I think there are pros and cons to actually suicidal people talking to suicidal people, but
rather than entering into a partnership where if you're doing it, I'm going to do it, and if you flake out on me, then it's bad.
Yeah. The peer pressure bit is the bit that I would worry about, yeah. And the fact that there are even these websites out there, that's what I don't like. I know that they exist in education. We have things, there's really horrendous websites out there for all sorts of mental health illnesses.
I Googled it and I had a look, and I was shocked by the amount of stuff out there, specifically aimed at people trying to find a suicide partner, people talking about suicide. Yes, it's great that people are talking about it, but when it's getting to the point where others are encouraging you to go ahead with it and others are encouraging you to get the partner, etc., that's where I worry.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't like the idea of that kind of thing, especially as you don't know who you're actually talking to on the internet. And this is something we tell the kids all the time and they never believe us. But actually, she's lucky that Raymond turned out to be who he said he was. But if they'd continued to talk online and not meet up, and they had just been somebody else who was just feeding into the depression, this could be a completely and much more negative story. And
exactly.
That would scare me.
Yeah, that would really scare me too. Finally, we then see that Roman manages to persuade Azel to tell him what her father did.
Well, he actually says, doesn't he, are you actually going to tell me?
Yeah, because he's like, you are going to be my suicide partner and I still don't know.
And I've told you.
Yes, you know my story. Let's have some sharing here.
Yeah.
What is it that is so bad that you can't tell me?
So she does.
And it turns out that he already knows.
Yeah. And I think he says, like, well, I kind of guessed. I kind of had an idea.
Your name is so unique, I kind of put two and two together.
Yeah, although she has even Googled to check that her name isn't associated with any of the news stories online and all that kind of stuff. So he shouldn't be able to Google her name and link it. But
because it's such a specific name.
It's Turkish, isn't it? And then there's not many Turkish people around in their area at the time, and so because of that he kind of makes the connection and links it together, and that's where it comes from. But he actually accepts it really well, and he almost like is surprised that that's the reason, because she is taking the guilt upon herself, and he's like, well, why would you? It's not you.
Exactly. And he also says that just because you are worried doesn't mean that it is going to happen. You are conscious of it. You know that there is something wrong. You know that your dad has had this mental health issue, and that just because he has it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to develop it either.
Yeah, and that, yes, it might be part of you because it's your dad, but it's not inevitable that you're going to do the same thing he did, which is basically saying to her, the reason you want to die isn't going to happen. Yeah,
or the reason that you're going to die, or the reason that you want to die is not because of your own behaviour.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really interesting at this point, because I think that's kind of when she's like, you know what, he hasn't changed his behaviour towards me. He still seems to kind of like me.
Yeah.
At this stage. And she's like, oh, okay, maybe things should be different.
Yeah, something that probably has been said to her before, but this is the first time she really hears it.
And I think it has to be from someone she cares about. And I think even though she cares about her family, this is an outsider from her family. It's not someone that she would think has to say these things. This is someone that wants to say these things to her.
Yeah, and he has every reason and every option to walk away at any point that he wants to throughout this, because they have become partners, but it's not a pact, it's not a contract. He can walk away,
even though he does keep calling her a flake.
Yes, but he doesn't. He actually realizes why she wants to, and then goes, you know what, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that reason is not really a suitable reason.
Yeah, and this brings us on to where he actually realises that she's probably not going to go through with it.
Exactly. He goes, you know what? He's kind of in some way supporting the fact that she wants to now live.
Yeah.
But without telling her that he still wants to go through with the suicide.
Yeah, although she's got a feeling that this is the case.
Exactly.
And they don't talk about this. This happens...
This is subtext, really.
Yeah, and then she goes off, he goes off in his way, and then she doesn't hear from him.
Well, she tries to contact him, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She's like, I'm coming over to you, are you there? And she doesn't get any response.
Yeah.
And that's when she starts to worry and she drives over to his house.
Yeah, and gets his mum and grabs his mum, and then they go to the place where they were going to commit suicide together, jumping over the cliff into the water. But his car's not there, he's not there, so they rush back to the house.
And it turns out that he was at the house all along, and the other alternative they had discussed about committing suicide was through asphyxiation by breathing in car exhaust. And we find out this is what he is doing. He is in the garage, it is closed up, and the garage is full of smoke, and they find him slumped over the front seat and over the steering wheel in his mum's car.
And at this moment in the book, I'm like, oh, come on, be in time, you know. It's rushing through your head, and they get him out, and they get him in an ambulance, and they get him off to hospital.
And we find out that he is okay, he's still alive. They caught him just in time, and the relief, I don't know about you, but the relief that I felt was like, thank goodness you are still alive, because you need to be. You have to keep fighting for life at this point.
She needs him to
and
be.
He needs her.
Yeah, and they need to show each other that life is worth going on. And this is a bit in the book that I was like, for teenagers to read this, you need him to live. Like, you know, I felt much more comfortable with them reading this with a positive outcome, although he tries and he wanted to. He wasn't doing it as an attempted suicide, but cry for help. He was doing it because he actually wanted to die at that point. He was doing it because he didn't want her to go through with it, but he felt he needed to. He even says that he felt that he couldn't do it on the day they'd agreed because he felt that actually that would be taking away from the memory of his sister, and he decided he needed to do it a different way and he needed to do it on a different day. So I found that really sort of emotional. But then I worried that when he woke up, is he going to be angry at her, or is he going to understand that she actually helped save him?
I think it could have gone either way, couldn't it, at this point?
Yeah, and I think either way would be natural, because if that's what you wanted and someone else stops that, then, you know, I can understand being angry with them, even though they've done the right thing. She did the right thing. She went and got him the help, and hopefully get him the help in the future.
Exactly. And she stays at the hospital. His mum is so thankful, and she feels guilty because she kind of knew that this was their plan all along, was to end their lives. And his mum is like so loving and is like, thank you so much for saving my son. But again, this guilt, because she could have told her at any time.
Yeah, because he actually wants the suicide partner, partly because his mum is so attentive to how he's feeling and so attentive to what's been going on that she's been almost overbearing in that he can't get away from her. So he feels that having this partner and actually pretending that they're almost dating makes the mum feel that he's actually getting better, and he is going out and he's seeing people, and he's got this girlfriend who's really lovely. Like, they even have dinner at her house, you know. And because of all that, he is then allowed out to then commit suicide.
Yeah.
And so he needs her for that reason. So she feels this guilt that they've basically lied and created this false sense of security for the mother, and then it all comes crashing down.
Exactly. And I think that by this point, you're kind of really rooting for them to be together.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but you're like, it's obvious she loves you, Roman. Come on, dude.
And it's obvious he loves her too. And you're like, Roman, you know you feel this. You did this because you wanted her to live, but you need to live too. And she actually says this to him. She actually says, you know, I can't lose you. She uses those words in the book. And this is a particular passage that I thought was so well written. I thought the author did it so well.
Particularly because it's the making him try and realise that he needs to live for himself and not for anyone else.
Yeah, but not making it too sweet and sickly and all that kind of stuff. It was really well done in the right sort of temperament. So she says, I can't lose you. He says, don't say that. And she says, no, it's true. I can't lose you. Roman, you have to decide to live. I know that nothing can ever erase what happened to Maddie, but you can't give up. And I thought that was really good, the way that she says, you know, it's not live for me. It's not live for us, it's live for you. And she even acknowledges, look, I get that this Maddie thing is hard and that it's tough and it's never going to go away.
It doesn't sweep it under the carpet, does it? No. Which is really nice.
It doesn't say, look, get up, get over it. It is actually going, look, this is hard. And I think that's what the ongoing theme in the book is, that these things are really hard to deal with. And these are things that teenagers really are dealing with. And she goes on and she says, some of the description of his face, where this bit where she writes, I can practically see his muscles aching under his skin. And you're just like, she says, I'm not asking you to live for me, even though that would be nice because I'm in love with you. And yeah, you can tell me I'm misusing that word, but I don't care. That's how I feel. But this isn't even about me or about how I feel about you. I want you to live for you because I know there's so much more waiting for you. There's so much more for you to discover and experience, and you deserve it. You might not think you do, but you do. I'm here to tell you that you deserve it. And I know I sound cheesy as hell. Believe me, 6 weeks ago, I would have slapped myself for saying things like this. But knowing you has helped me see things differently, see myself differently. And all I want to do for you, to see yourself the way that I do. And I thought that was so beautiful.
It's very hard hitting as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It makes you well up inside, it makes you really see that she, at this point, she really doesn't know how he's going to react. He could be angry with her still, but she's going, look, I did this all with the right intentions. I did this because I want you to be saved how you've saved me. You've made me realise it's worth carrying on, and I want to do the same for you. And it's like a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really hard.
And she also encourages him to speak to the psychologist that is seeing him.
Yeah.
Because he is very dead set against it. And she's like, you need to speak to her.
Yeah. And she says that she knows that this might not even work, but she felt she needed to put this spark in there and see if it made the motion towards him getting the help he needed. But she felt that she just had to do it.
And I think it's really nice that it kind of leaves the book there, and we don't necessarily know if Roman takes up the opportunity to speak to someone. All we know is that they are still alive. He's still in hospital, and he still has a future. He still has a life. There is still potential there, and I'm kind of grateful for that.
Yeah, and you can still see that Roman is struggling. Like, he talks, even when he does say that, he should be, because it ends on the day that they should have committed suicide. He's still in hospital, and he says, I should be at her grave. Today of all days, I should be there. And you can see the guilt that's still there. So you still realise that, maybe he still wants to. And that's where the book ends with, actually, maybe he still wants to. But at the same time, maybe there's a future, because she talks about the ocean. He loves the ocean.
And the fact that they are going to go to on a trip to the ocean, for him to see it for the first time.
Yeah. And so even though it's not gone, yes, everything's happy and cured. They're all walking away into the sunset as happy as Larry. Everything's going to be
holding
fine.
hands and skipping.
Yeah, it doesn't end that way. And I'm glad it doesn't end that way.
I think it would be too superficial if it did.
Yeah, but it ends with hope that things might have changed for Roman. And you definitely know things have changed for Azel.
So I really, really did enjoy this book. I would recommend it for anyone. As we say, it is a book that is specifically dealing with suicide for the young adult population. And yeah, give it a read.
Yeah.
If you haven't already.
Yeah, and all ages, of teenagers, I would say, late teens, it's definitely worth a read. If you are having suicidal thoughts, though, make sure that you read it, but you also talk to people about how you're feeling about it and what's going on. Please stay away from those websites, but go onto websites that are going to give you help.
Exactly. The top one that we can recommend is the charity Mind. Also, if you're feeling suicidal, to contact the Samaritans. We will make sure that we have all the details of these organisations in our show notes.
Yeah, I hope you have enjoyed listening to this. I know some of these stuff's really hard hitting, but I think that it's really worth talking about. As we've talked before, the more we talk about these things and the more we do, to some extent, normalise the chatting about them, I think the more people that will actually ask for help. And then hopefully, teenagers like this will pick life. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. See you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Mental Health Book Club podcast. If you feel that you need additional support with your mental health, please call the Samaritans on 116-123, which is a 24-hour helpline. And if you need additional information about mental health issues, please visit Mind at mind.org.uk. Next week we will be doing a deep dive into depression. Our next book will be Autism, Anxiety and Me by Emma Louise Bridge. To find out more, please visit our website, mentalhealthbookclub.com. We would really love to hear what you think about this podcast. Please get in touch with us at our Facebook page, which is the Mental Health Book Club, or at our Twitter, which is at MHBC_podcast. And if you like the podcast, please share it with your family and friends and leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.